I'm Mary Steenburgen. If you don't know who I am by now, why are you watching me anyway? Anyway, welcome to a session in which I will attempt to share with you what has taken me 50 years to learn. Boy, are you lucky. We're going to be discussing harmony and notation and voicings and blues and jazz and all kinds of concepts. But it might be instructive if I tell you how I got into playing jazz in the first place. I came in through the back door when I was 13 or 14 or 15, although I occasionally heard jazz on the radio because it was part of the American mainstream music in those days. I hadn't really plugged into it. But the big idol in the late 30s was a gentleman piano player named Eddie Duchin. They later made a movie of his life. He was big, like, you know, an Elvis Presley is big, or Barbra Streisand, whoever. And half the teenagers in America wanted to be like, as we say, Eddie Duchin. And as a result of that, almost all of us learned how to play some introductions that Mr. Duchin introduced in those days. And to this day, a lot of teenagers play these things. For example, and then there were many variations in different keys. And some of my buddies and I, when we were 14 or 15, used to sit down, two of us at one piano, and play little four-hand selections, duets, with one of us doing this. And the big song in that day, because you could play the first 16 bars of it with these Sears and Roebuck chords, was Heart and Soul. So we went. So forth. That's not in the chord changes, but I'm improving things. Anyway, one day it literally occurred to me that if I could learn to do that left-hand stuff by myself and continue to play with one finger on the melody, I would be a piano player. So it took me about 2 weeks to get the two halves of my brain together, and finally this is what I was playing. And so forth. And that was so much fun, I've never stopped. So I've always been indebted to Mr. Duchin, and so have millions of other young folks of that day, even though not all of us went on to play jazz. One of the reasons for Eddie Duchin's great popularity, and he was the biggest, is that he played wonderful songs. He played Broadway show tunes, Irving Berlin, Jerome Kern, Cole Porter, that classy stuff. And he played pretty, not jazz, but very pretty stuff. So many of us in that day were influenced by his romanticism and the general prettiness of his playing. You might have noticed earlier when I was just running through that simple chorus of Tenderly. There's a prettiness there, which I don't think is a bad idea. In fact, my favorite jazz artists over the whole 60-year span or so have been those who played up a storm and had great chops, but always had something pretty to their playing. Lester Young would be one example. And even some of the bop guys could do it. The best of them all, Charlie Parker, has had albums made of his solos, voiced for 5 saxes, because no matter how fast or how hard he was swinging, there was always a pretty element to his playing. So hooray for that. We need more of that in the world. Then some other, I had a note here too. Oh yes. Another thing that we're going to be talking about is harmony. Now, I play by ear, and just as I write my songs by ear with practically no background training or even often understanding of what I'm doing, my harmonic sense has been largely developed by ear too. Now, that's nice for me, but don't get off on that side track. I have seen one of the video tapes of this instruction series by Warren Bernhardt, and I plan to spend a lot more time with it because he is a superb teacher, especially of harmonics. So I'll be talking about that, but for the better instruction, please do go to that particular tape because he's a marvelous instructor, and I plan to learn from him, and I've already started doing that. If you're a beginner, as you probably are, you might have trouble getting any bass players or drummers to work with you. If they're beginners too, they're willing to, but they probably won't help you any, so forget them for now until they improve. And the real pros won't want to sit in with you either. So a solution to that is to get some pre-recorded computer-type rock or jazz, any kind of rhythm tracks, because using that demonstrates to you and gets you accustomed to the importance of relating the playing of your ideas to the underlying rhythm. You could theoretically be a good player, except you couldn't keep time, and therefore you couldn't get any work, except as perhaps a saloon pianist. For example, I'll hit a track here and see what pops up, and then we'll try to play a little jazz with that. And it is a good idea because, first of all, it gives you a kind of a psychological feeling of being in a group, and I repeat, it gets you practiced at keeping strict rhythm, which is important. So let's see. Yeah. You can do that for hours at a time, but for now we don't want to spend too much time just me having fun. I'm supposed to be teaching you something. Now, even if you personally knew nothing whatever about the piano, if you were just thinking of maybe studying it someday, you would have no trouble grasping the simple point that as regards, let's say, the simplest chord there is, the C chord, which in the most primitive form involves just these three notes, C, E, and G. You have no trouble perceiving that there are many different ways in which you can combine those three notes, C, E, G, without changing the fact that what you're playing is still a C chord. For example, instead of having the C here at the bottom, see there it is, you could lift it out, so to speak, and play the C here. It's a different voicing. It's interesting why they use that word voice, because it has to do with the human noise we make with our mouths, but who cares about those problems? Anyway, it's still a C chord. Or you can take this E out of its most common position and add it here, and that too is a C chord. So there's any number of ways, as I say, in this case with the C in the middle, or however you want to look at it. Then there are ways that you can, again while still playing a C chord, enrich it. You might want to, for example, add the sixth note of the scale, which in this case is A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's your A. And that means you would be playing what is sort of in the basic sense a C, but now it's called a C sixth. And see how much richer, prettier. That sounds like what used to be called close harmony. Four-voice vocal groups use that kind of thing a lot. The high-lows, the freshmen, all those great groups, the modern eras. Again, it relates to this, but it's prettier, richer. Now, there are other cases where you can use only two notes of a chord rather than the usual three or more, and still have it recognizable as what it is. Let's say we're talking about the C chord. This is particularly the case when what you're playing is what we call tenths, T-E-N-T-H-S, tenths. It's based, of course, on the number 10, and all it means, the word tenths means, is simply that between the first note and the second note, there are 10 spaces, 10 notes. So there's a C tenth, and there's a E flat tenth, F minor tenth, G minor tenth. And if you listen to old jazz piano recordings, and by the way, do that, listen to all the great, and even for that matter, the lousy piano recordings you can lay your hands on, you will learn something literally from every one of them. From the lousy ones, you'll learn what not to do, and maybe you'll pick up a pointer or two that would not have occurred to you yourself. Anyway, when you do listen to the recordings, especially from the 20s and early 30s, and isn't it marvelous we have these time capsules? We can really go back musically to 1926 if you want to. You won't hear many examples of the playing of the tenths. But in the, I guess in the mid-1930s, and for chiefly the following 20 years, you do hear more of that sort of thing. Some jazz pianists, Teddy Wilson is a particular example, employed tenths a great deal. And you can, in combination with right-hand notes, achieve not only harmonic richness in this way, but if you're a little lazy, you can also save yourself a little trouble by not playing what is called stride piano, in which the left hand hits either a single note or an octave, relatively low on the keyboard, and then very quickly that same hand jumps up here and plays the chord that goes with it, to refer to those old Eddie Duchin things again. If you were playing stride, I'll do it slowly, it would go like this. And as I told you, that's how I originally began to play pop music anyway, by learning to do that with one hand, whereas the Eddie Duchin school did it with two hands. And Eddie used to use that as an introduction to many of his great recordings and live performances. Now, you get a vigorous, peppy, swinging feeling with the stride style. You hear that in a lot of the old guys, Willie the Lion Smith, Fats Waller, many of the great players of the 20s and 30s. Whereas, by comparison, with the use of tenths, you get more a feeling of smoothness and prettiness and sometimes harmonic sophistication. I'll show you something that Teddy Wilson showed me when I was doing the Benny Goodman movie. He was in it, of course, and I didn't care that much about the movie, but I loved hanging out with Teddy Wilson and Gene Krupa and all those great players. This is a sequence of tenths he showed me on a particular song, and never mind the song, but this is what he showed me. Again, just watch the left hand. Repeat. And as soon as I learned that, the part of my brain that composes music went to work up here, and I wrote several songs that relate to that sort of group of chords. And one went... So again, notice the smoothness, and Art Tatum was also very given to that sort of thing, harmonic richness and a sort of a pretty quality when you use that. It's distinguished from the old, what you might associate with the Count Basie, which is... Don't the moon look lonesome shining through the trees? So forth. Then, starting in, I'm pretty sure it was the late 1940s, a number of creative young pianists, some of the bebop or bop school as it was called, began to make very rare use of tenths, and for that matter also they rarely used the old stride rhythm style. In fact, they began to use their left hands much less as a rhythm instrument. The piano to this day is considered one of the rhythm instruments. The others are the guitar or banjo or whatever, and the drums and the bass. There usually are said to be four rhythm in a band that has those players. And it'll never stop, the piano will never stop being considered a rhythm instrument. It's just that it's much more than that. You might not always enjoy a drum solo, even from the greatest, but you'll always enjoy a piano solo for a number of obvious reasons. So anyway, the modern guys, generally starting around 1950 or so, they began to use their left hands chiefly to play peck or accent chords while doing the singing jazz solo, so to speak, with the notes in the right hand. So you hear that a lot today, and it's nothing wrong with that. I hope you'll learn to do that, but I wouldn't totally lose the other stuff, because the great players like Oscar Peterson, for example, he has it all. He hasn't thrown anything away from the 1920s, so you shouldn't either. Now let's talk again about harmony. That'll keep coming up in your entire career as a pianist, so you'll never give up on it, or you'll never think you know it all. So to refer again to the area of harmony, you will want to familiarize yourself with what can be called the circle of fourths. We're talking about four notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, starting at any arbitrary point. For reasons that are rather mysterious, historic, and even now not totally clear, but because we are accustomed to such relationships in Western European American music, there's something about certain chords that seems naturally to lead to other chords. For example, something sort of sensible sounding about that. That's not the only alternative. You can go from that to another chord, and there are additional possibilities. But the point is here that there are rules of traffic in music too. You can't just jump from something to any other note or combination and expect people to listen to it. You have the freedom to do so, but it usually sounds terrible. So there's not much of a market for it. So again, to use an illustration with C, the simplest note of all, C is our bass line. Let's say we're playing a C seventh. 1, 3, 5. Now this is, strictly speaking, the seventh note in the C scale, but and there is such a chord. That's called a C major. And this is where you minor or flat the seventh note, and that's the form in which it's usually used. Now you can take these two notes and put them down here, so you get, but however you voice it, it's still a C7. Now you ordinarily would not finish a song with that. It sounds somehow incomplete. So it creates sort of a mysterious appetite for something else, and that something else is what they usually refer to as a resolution, or at least a progression. A lot of terms in music, as there are in motorcycle maintenance and knitting and everything else, so might as well get hip to all the terms. Now if you count up 4 notes from C, 1, 2, 3, 4, what we want to hear is either an F chord or an F seventh. And then if you count up from the F, 1, 2, 3, 4, then you get a B flat seventh. And from the B flat, 1, 2, 3, 4, an E flat seventh. And from that, 1, 2, 3, 4, an A flat seventh, and so forth. You just go all around the circle of keys that way if you want to. So in your spare time, spend quite a lot of time familiarizing yourself with that. You can do it formally, ask your instructor to explain more of it to you, watch Mr. Bernhardt's tape about that, but also play with it yourself. It's one thing to attend a lecture or see a tape and agree with every word and learn something from it, but unless you've put it into practice, a lot of it will blow away. Now, another interesting thing about chords and their harmonic relationship is that, especially in modern jazz playing, you can play what will serve as, let's say, a D7th or a D9th, and yet, oddly enough, never have an actual D in the chord. There would be an example. This is sort of implied, but a lot of the modern guys are not playing it. It's nice if the bass player does it, or you hum it or something, but you can get away with this. And again, it applies to all keys. I'm just selecting this particular illustration at random. You can see again these 3 notes. Now it'll be nice, I repeat, if in the bass player, or your left hand somehow, is playing the D root relationship, because then that gives you the equivalent of this D up here. But this relationship without the root note, I mean, is perfectly acceptable and these days quite common. One of the things that all jazz people are involved with is the form loosely described as the blues. Let's consider again the scale, and again, for simplicity's sake, we're with the scale in C. For reasons we don't have to go into, if we take the 3rd note and we go down a half step, which is to say we flat that note, not flatten, but flat, somehow that does sound related to jazz and the blues. It sounds hipper. And the same point applies to doing the same thing to the 5th note. That's the G, and if we flat it, that too is a very common, I won't say device, because that's not quite what it is, but these 2 notes in a scale often give a solo a feeling of bluesiness, or jazziness. So you should be familiar with that. One of the thrilling things, fascinating things about jazz is that if you gave 100 jazz players, let's say, the same tune, let's say Honeysuckle Rose, and you said, just sit down here, Mac, and play, a chorus of that, no two of them would play it the same way. Some of them might stick to the original harmonies, probably not many would even do that. But just think of that, 100 guys playing the same song and no two of them doing it the same. And if you were the 101st one, even though at this point you might not be a great player yet, you too would have something to contribute that Earl Garner didn't if he were in the list, you see. For example, the other day I was playing that song not long ago, just monkeying around at home, and I asked myself, what if at a certain point I began to do descending half steps in tenths, again going in half steps down south here on the keyboard. I just asked myself, I didn't know whether it would sound good or terrible, and it turned out to be very interesting. And I've since then showed it to some guys who play much better than I do, and they were fascinated by it. That it had never occurred to them. So I'll just to play it slowly. You can play any tune fast or slow. I'll play it slowly. It'll make it easier for you to see what I'm doing. Now watch. And again, now we're in A flat. Down steps. Then the bridge conventionally and back to that. So there's not going to be any headline in the papers around the country about this, but nobody else ever thought of it before, and I'm definitely not one of the world's great players. So you too have that freedom to be spontaneously creative and to try things. Sometimes you'll try something that'll be just dreadful, and you'll never do that again. But who knows, you might stumble over something that will enable you to retain it and use it again. So now let's talk about what are called runs, R-U-N-S. That simply means lots of notes played in either ascending or descending order. For example, that's an example of a run. Now eventually, a few years down the line, you should definitely master that ability, simply because all the superior players do it. It's a good addition to your palette of musical colors, so to speak. Doesn't mean that if you're great in all other ways, you can't make a living without that, but since everybody does it, don't argue. Just learn how to do that. But here's kind of a cute point. Before you learn to do that properly, and your teacher will show you how, there's a way of doing a fake run. It sounds almost exactly like a legitimate one, and but it isn't. And it's accomplished simply, but you'll be very disappointed when I tell you, it's accomplished simply by running the back of your thumb down the black keys, or for that matter, not your thumb in this case, the back of your hand, up the black keys. Now obviously if you're playing in a key that involves mostly white keys, such as C, or F, or G, that trick ordinarily will not work, because the harmonies you're playing in doing a run will clash or disagree with the harmonies you're likely to be playing with your left hand. That's true most of the time, but isn't it lovely how many exceptions there are in life? For example, suppose you're in C and you're going from an E minor and you're headed for a D minor. And there's nothing wrong with going from one to the other. But what a lot of guys will do is they'll take a little step between that where they go like this. Again, that note and this note. So while you're even in the key of C, I repeat, going from that, when you hit this, Now, remember that any run may also be interpreted as a very big chord with the notes played one at a time. A chord, C-H-O-R-D, a chord is a collection of anywhere from 2 to an infinite number of notes. If you had a creature from another planet and he had 5 hands with, say, 7 fingers on each hand, he would be physically able to play a 35-note chord, wouldn't he? But that's science fiction. As a more practical matter, generally a chord consists of 3 or 4 notes. So again, when you're playing 20 or 30 notes with one of your descending runs, or even if you're doing it the right way, there are some chords that you are in effect playing. The basic one would be G flat. Here's your G, and one step down, of course, a half step is your G flat. So that, since it consists of many of the notes you're going to play with your thumb, works very easily. Or consider the A flat 9th or 7th. Against that chord too, since it has a lot of blank notes in it, you can also get away with doing this. Works very nicely. And E flat minor. The run works just fine. Another little point, not major, little, but worth talking about, concerns what are called trills, not thrills. A trill is a thrill if you're from Brooklyn, but a trill is just a little thing. You can play it on any instrument, and it's not one limited thing. It's anytime you play 2 or 3 notes, but in a kind of a little canary bird relationship. For example, or those are among the possibilities of playing trills. Naturally, we don't expect that when you master a trill, the whole world will fall down and say, wow, what a great player. But it's just one more little trick of the trade, and it comes in handy in playing jazz. You can also sometimes add a note of sweetness and beauty to an out-of-tempo passage. By that means, I'll play one of my songs, a few bars of it here, called Impossible, and I'll throw in a trill or two to see you. You shouldn't overuse it, but anyway, it's a nice color, for example. See? That's the word of the moment about trills. The trill, of course, did not originate in modern music. It's been part of the legitimate classic language for centuries. And therefore, obviously, as I've earlier said, it's not limited to jazz, but one more little device that can enrich your playing of jazz. Playing jazz, like doing many things, is a matter of mastering a fairly long or even a short list of tricks of the trade, and then of developing the judgment as to when to apply trick A or when not to apply trick 17 or whatever. One has to do with something that I think was popular in the 1920s. I never heard this exact link, but there were piano tricks that were common in those days, late 20s, early 30s. There was a man named Zez, Z-E-Z, Confrey. He wrote at least one song which is famous called Kitten on the Keys. And a lot of the guys in that day, including a very fine pianist of the 30s named Bob Zurke, Z-O-R-K-E, did this. Let's say we're working with a C7th, or now it has to do with adding to that as your basic factor, the factor of this rhythmic thing, which I'll at the moment do with my mouth. And I'll do it very slowly. When you do it fast, it sounds like this. Again. if you're in F, in B flat 7th, E flat 7th. So you don't want to overuse that, or it becomes obviously a trick, and you can work it into the ground. But it's a nice little extra thing to have available to you if you suddenly have a C7 chord coming up and you're playing jazz and you can't think of anything brilliantly new to do about it. I often go back to. So there's one more trick for you. Then there's another thing I mentioned earlier that particularly in the 1930s, a lot of the jazz players would play their ideas that sounded a lot, as I said, like trumpet ideas by just using octaves. That sort of stuff. Nothing wrong with it. But another little gimmick is that you can do on the piano the equivalent of what a trumpet player gets by doing a vibrato. Now you can't make no matter how much you do that, you can do that on a violin string and get that sort of a little feeling, but you can't, the piano will only make that noise no matter what stick you do with your little finger. However, you can get an illusion or an equivalent, let's say, of that vibrato. Singers use it a lot. A guy will go, and the moon, especially blues singers and stuff. So all you do is rattle it or roll it or use your own language, I don't care. If it's tough for you, especially at first to get the rattly effect, what you can do is position one of your other fingers, the second or third, doesn't matter, as a sort of a pivot, and you can oscillate off that pivot. If you don't need that, then don't bother about it. I'm not promoting this because it's not available anyway. You couldn't buy a copy if you wanted to. It's been long out of print. But I'll show you this. Here, I'll hold it steady. Yes. As you can see, it says The Discovery of Buck Hammer. And there's a pen and ink sketch of a rather portly black gentleman. The important point is that there is no such person as Buck Hammer. This was a put-on, but the music was serious. I did this, Lord, it must be about 30 years ago. Just a little prank on the jazz critics, practical joke, you might say. And it had some very serious scholarly liner notes, except, as I repeat, it was a total put-on. And the jazz critics loved it. They liked my playing much more once they thought I was black and dead than my actual situation. But anyway, it was full of boogie-woogie playing, because to return to my opening comments about Eddie Duchin, at that same time in the 1930s, boogie-woogie as a piano style swept the country. There were Albert Ammons and Meade Lux Lewis and a lot of the great players in that style. And because a lot of the boogie-woogie licks involve these sort of these discordances, which are now considered part of funk, I think really that is where funk sort of got started in a sense. Now, there is no limit to the possible bass figures. You could make one up yourself, and good, you've pioneered new territory. But there are some which are classics. One of the earliest is simply a walking bass in which you play a succession of octaves like this. And then going into F, and so forth. Then there are others which go, or you can play it in a kind of a train rhythm, or and then there was a man named Freddie Slack who did a lot of good boogie-woogie playing, and he had his own basses which tended to go like this. one that's the simplest of all, which I often use, and then, of course, if we're playing in C, then when you go up to the F change, and when you go to the G change, to the F, back to the C. Now I'll play an actual boogie-woogie number for you. It's just the blues. The harmonics are simply the blues. And it also adds additional excitement if you can get a drummer, a bass player, or for that matter, a 27-piece band to go, with the horns. But one of the great advantages of boogie-woogie playing is it sounds pretty good when you're playing it all alone with nobody helping you. Walking bass. You will never, your whole career, you become the world's greatest pianist. You will never stop playing the blues, never stop thinking about it, never stop writing blues numbers. There's something incredibly energetic and ageless about that musical form. Never sounds old-fashioned. But of course, if you're a fairly new player, you can't expect to express yourself in dazzlingly proficient ways. Fortunately, the blues has got you covered in that regard. Let me show you just one example, working in this case in the key of F, and working with chords that have only two notes to them in the left hand. For example, you have your 4 bars of that, and then you go up, and that brings you to your B flat. 2 bars of that, and then back to your F, then your C, your B flat, and then naturally you can add whatever you want to. Very simple. And there are many simple things you can do in let's say, C, or theoretically any key. But it's easy to show you in C. Here's a little figure, for example. In the left hand, it's just C. For the most part, you're dealing in octaves. And all you need up here is these 2 notes, that B flat, that E natural. It's obviously related to, those notes are related to a C seventh, but by doing that simple thing, something kind of cute shows up. half step down. Again, very simple. And then when you get to the F, you relate it to just a half step down from where your hand is anyway here, see? And back to your original. And then to get away from monotony, when you're playing your G, whatever you want to play there. Anything there, just ad lib, but once I learned that about, 10 years ago, I immediately wrote a couple of tunes that based on that little discovery. Now, one of the nice things about the blues is you can play them in any style, in any key. You might want to, instead of playing a very funky, earthy kind of blues, you could play very pretty. Remember a long time back we talked about the flatted fifth? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There it is. And the flatted third. You can also have minor blues in addition to major. Classic instance, of course, is Great St. Louis Blues. It's in a minor key. And the original version of it had some kind of tango sections. So again, the blues is, are, am. By the way, would you like to know where the blues comes from? I mean, the words? I've discovered that no other jazz musician on earth seems to know, so I didn't know either. But I read a lot and I buy old books, and I came across a slang dictionary published, I think, in 1847, and to my great surprise, the term was there. It's a shortened version of a longer phrase, the blues, 2 words. The original phrase was the Blue Devils, and it relates to delirium tremens, the most advanced stage of alcoholism, when, because of years of heavy drinking, your brain is pretty much shot, and you begin to see strange animals, and you think you see alligators on the wallpaper and so forth. In fact, you can become so far out, you're quite convinced the animals are real, because you're, at that point anyway, crazy. So it's often accompanied with hangovers and feelings of worthlessness and, the problems of alcoholism. So the original meaning was that so-and-so is in such trouble that he's got, or he thinks he sees, the Blue Devils. And it was finally shortened to the blues. And exactly how it became hooked up with that musical phrase, we don't know precisely, but we know in a general sense, and that is the original lyrics of blues, and to this day many of the lyrics carry a rather sad message. My baby left me, and it's kind of bad news of one kind. Or I woke up this morning and my old lady was gone, or whatever the bad news is. So it had to do originally with depression resulting from alcoholism, and later spread out to include depression from, for any reason. And that's where the term comes from. Now here's another little harmonic gimmick. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not one of those cheap tricks, but it does come in handy, whether you're composing or playing jazz, which is a matter of instantaneous composing if you do it right. It has to do with a minor chord. It doesn't matter whether it's C minor, G minor, F minor, A minor. Let's just say we'll make it in G minor arbitrarily. That relates, of course, to a prior chord, which is the G major. And then you flat the third note. That makes it minor, which, as we've already said, sounds sad. If you ever need sad, try a minor if you're scoring a movie someday or something of the sort. Now, here's the gimmick. You're playing this simplest form of G minor with your left hand, of course. Now, you keep these right where they are, repeat them as often as you want, but you get some descending movement with your bottom finger, your little finger. First of all, it goes down a half a step. See, already you've got another harmonic color. And then by doing that same simple thing again, going down one half step and then once more, and in some cases, that far. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you kind of get those chords for free, so to speak. You don't have to use your brain much to realize you got 5 different sounds. And just about all of the great composers have used that, and I'm sure even before there was such a thing as American popular music, you'll undoubtedly find that in some of the classics. And again, watch the left hand. There's a song of mine, come to think of it, which doesn't start out with that change, but it gets to it pretty quickly. Written a million years ago, called The Things My Heart Tells Me. I'll play it simply so you can see where that harmony progression comes in. There it is. Nice note against it, right? Here it comes again. It's been used as Richard Rodgers' My Funny Valentine. Recognize it? Ski boo doo boom booby boom. And so there, just for learning any minor chord, you've got 4 other chords for free. Again, simplest thing in the world. Swing is a great word. First of all, even if there's no such thing as music, swing is a nice word. It sounds kind of cute, and we think of swings under trees and so forth. It became an important word musically in the 1930s. People had swung before musically, but somehow the word became common and generally understood in the 30s. We still refer to that as the swing era, the era of the swing bands and so forth. And to this day, there are certain players who swing more than others. It's possible to be a good jazz player and not get a feeling of swing much, but if you can get that feeling too, it's a plus. Better to do 8 things great than 5 or 6, right? And The style of the 1930s involved very largely swing. I'll just play here an old song called You Can Depend on Me. In its simplest, it goes. Now in a medium 2-beat tempo. That swings. One of the things I did, one of the devices I employed, was one I mentioned to you earlier, and that is the matter of playing the musical ideas that occurred to me in octave form, with that little roll at the end of certain phrases. Again. Then another thing I did in other parts of that was adding the fifth. We explained that some time back in the video cassette. So those are two of the pieces or gimmicks that we used. And then in the left hand, to get that kind of bouncy, ba-ching, ching, 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 bump, bump, ba-ching. First of all, you select the tempo, which goes without saying. But in addition to just keeping the tempo strict, you also, as I say, want to make it swing. The old great players of the 20s and 30s would have done the the stride stuff, but most of us are too lazy to bother about that. And you can get the same effect. It's sort of modified stride. And you can, in addition to that, That's the common approach that was very common in, as I say, the 30s. But you can also add a little of the Earl Garner left-hand technique to it. That's the way, as I say, Earl Garner used to play, not necessarily those same notes, but picking up every beat. And then in addition, since you don't want to play the whole thing with this style, occasionally you'll play little single note figures, for example. Remember the old free fake run? You noticed how I worked it in there? So once you learn these gimmicks, then the trick is to learn when to use them, and sometimes when not to use them too. And you put all that together, and it spells whatever it does. I've earlier mentioned that my favorite piano player, I'm not knocking the other giants, but there's some emotional reaction I get from a man named Errol Garner. I once wrote a novel, my first novel, one steamy summer in New York City, sitting with an occasional can of cold beer next to my typewriter and getting up about every 25 minutes to turn over an album by Errol, an old yellow label 10-incher, because he was playing beautiful ballads, and he's the most romantic player of all time, jazz or non-jazz. Beautiful style. He really had two separate styles, but we could maybe say three or four, but two that dominate. One is this, one of the great swingers of all time, and the other was his romantic ballad style. One of the distinguishing features of his, and there's not much point in your working hard to learn it, because whenever anybody does it, he always sounds like he's imitating Errol Garner, the way that a performer might imitate Jimmy Cagney. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's nice to be able to do that impression. But oddly enough, Earl was on such a planet of his own that, again, to imitate him or be influenced by him is always to sound as if you're doing him. The ballad stuff is so pretty, I do it anyway. I'm not trying to claim original. It's all Errol's, and of course, I add my own style to it. But his left hand was famous. It sounded like Freddie Green, the guitar player, with Count Basie. It was just one beat per one chord per beat, although he could vary it. See how it sounds like a guitar player? But that was the characteristic thing. Then he had a totally different style. It's almost as if there were two separate personalities, multiple personalities, as we say, locked up in that man's wonderful head. And the other one was applied to pretty ballads. I won't even play a song here. I'll just play some chords, but the kinds of things that he used to do. So forth. Even though, as I say, you should not decide to become another Earl Garner, even if you could, it's good to know what he did, monkey around with it, have fun with it. Sometimes it's great fun if you're playing ballads. But since he is one of the giants of piano jazz achievement of all time, you should know a lot about Earl Garner. Great guy and an incredibly magnificent player. That's a song of mine called Spring Is Where You Are, first 16 bars anyway. And I play it by way of making a point which is that you don't have to wait till, after 14 years of hard work, you finally develop freaky chops. Even when you are still limited as regards your finger technique, you can still play very pretty and very listenable things. And there are pianists who deliberately choose not to dazzle the viewer with their technical virtuosity. Art Tatum often would do that, but he could also play simply. And the classic instance, of course, is Count Basie, who, very simple notes, but he could get the whole block swinging. And on ballads, too, if what you're playing is sensible stuff, you don't have to dazzle to be interesting. I'll use as an illustration an old song from, I think, around 1930 called Confessin', or I'm Confessin' That I Love You. Its harmonies were pretty simple, but they're pretty, and I'll deliberately play pretty slowly, although occasionally I'll throw in a little toodle-o stuff, so you can see how you can play, again, simply and yet okay. We'll just start without an intro. Okay. By the way, a couple of little ending tricks you might want to employ. You're ending this, let's say, in E flat on some version of an E flat chord, but it's pretty if you go up a half step into an E-based thing. So you're really working with this, but you're going up a half step. Now you resolve that by going back to your E flat, and here's another gimmick trick. Instead of playing as you would expect some completion of the E flat chord, you deliberately go one step higher into F. Now at first you might think you can't be playing an E flat thing and an F thing at the same time. They don't make sense, but you're wrong. Or I was wrong and I ever thought that. Anyway, here's how they sound together. Here's your E flat, here's your F. Isn't that nice? Sort of a chime effect. So again, the tricks are as follows. If you're in E flat, you go up, and if you're ending something in F, you go up half the step. And if you were ending again in the F, then the chord you would play in your right hand is a G. Or you can play notes one at a time. Tricks of the trade. I'll tell you what I'm doing here, just demonstrating another trick. It would be better if we all had the facility of a Phineas Newborn Jr. or any of the, Paul Smith or any of the really masters of the keyboard, but not all of us do. We may 6 years from now, but you probably don't, or you wouldn't be bothering with this cassette instruction. But there are certain things that are very easy to do, and you can put them to work early. And this is one of them. Or just, you take any 4 notes you want. It can be these 4 notes, or these 4. Doesn't matter. Make it easy on yourself. But let's just stick with this one. We're in E flat. Let's see. Now you practice at first. You may sound like this. But if you can practice even when you're at the beach. Put your hand on a seashell or something and go. And then when you make that fast sort of horse galloping movement, or sound I should say, on notes, or just, it would be better if we could all do dazzling things like the Gershwin thing. But you probably haven't gotten to that yet. But you can do something that fools people into thinking you're playing with that degree of facility, and if you employ this gimmick, for example, sometimes when I'm finishing up, let's say, an 8-bar phrase, it'll come out like this. And you can combine it with a handful of notes you bite off, for example. In other words, you're going, and then when you get to here, here's where you do that trick. Or in another chord. See how much of that was, and the notes go by so fast that people won't realize you're doing that really simple thing. And so forth. But again, the simple thing is, and practice it so you can do it this fast. I'll play a pretty song for you, and then I will go back over it and analyze, or at least comment upon what I did. It does help if you start with a pretty song, and this one certainly is. By the way, although jazz players tend to modify or alter somehow, improve upon perhaps, the original harmonies, it's not always necessary to do so, either to play jazz or to make a living. And sometimes when the original harmonies are so rich, it would be a good idea first to master them before you start taking liberties. Notice that we're starting here with a fourth interval, which by itself doesn't sound particularly pretty, but when you add it to other notes in the left hand, notice the rich, remarkable beauty of it. Then we're going down a whole step, and now a simple G minor, F7th, Now again, let's talk about what I did. I repeat what I earlier explained. We start with this discord, which becomes lovely when you add it to this. All we're adding it to is a simple E-flat chord in the bass. Then we go down to the D-flat, and if you want to, you can do the, instead of just that, you can go. And the G minor. Now the again, you can do that half-step lowering thing. Now the composer takes us up here into another key, the key of C. Now we go to the C minor. Remember this thing I told you about before? Here it comes. To the top. You've got that E there. The half step down thing. Lovely song. And that's the ending trick I told you about earlier, where instead of just playing the E-flat, you go up a half a step. And let's try that other ending thing where, although you're ending basically on an E-flat, you put the F in the right hand. Lovely. As one more example of the usefulness of this gimmick, considering it now in G minor, there's Johnny Mandel's beautiful ballad, which had it been written in the 1930s would now be a standard. But anyway, it's a gorgeous song. It's called A Time for Love. And notice again how it employs that little harmonic trick. Here it comes. Here it is again. And again. You can usually tell, whether on television or in real life, that a conversation or some proceeding is over because somebody uses the word well. So, well, it looks like that's it for now. The old clock on the wall says we need a new clock on the wall. But that'll do you for now. And of course, you'll be looking at this tape again and again. And each time, this is important, each time you see it, you'll notice something or reinterpret something that you somehow had missed out on the first time. That's true of reading books. If you read a book today and then read the same book a year later, you'll usually be astonished at what a dunce you were in the first reading because there was so much you didn't notice till the second reading. And if you think that's something, wait till you read the book 14 times. Anyway, I do hope this has been useful to you. The point of all this is not to turn you into another Oscar Peterson, but to share with you a few tricks of the trade, as I've said, that I've acquired over the years. Some I drew up out of my own creativity, such as it is, and others were simply shown to me. Teddy Wilson gave me a free lesson, so did Earl Garner on one occasion, and when I was hosting The Tonight Show and Art Tatum was a guest, even he was kind enough to devote about a minute and a half to instructing me. So one of the wonderful things about doing all those talk shows over the years is we had all the great jazz players, and whenever the people were piano players, I spent half the show staring at them and picking up what little I could. Anyway, what they have given to me, I've now shared with you, and in combination with the other instruction tapes, plus the practicing you're doing, and the work with your own teacher or teachers, I hope it all adds up to something worthwhile for you. If it does, maybe drop me a line. Not this week, but later when you've had time to think it over. Thanks very much.